We are delighted that you're joining us for another podcast of Wake Up Aligned, and it is the podcast for chiropractors where we get to talk about chiropractic lifestyle, and topics of interest. You can contact us through our email, and that is mailbag@amcfamily.com.
Okay, going to jump into another episode of Wake Up Aligned. Hopefully, for those of you that tune into the show all the time, you know who I am. But if you happen to be stumbling around on Spotify and you find this podcast, I'm Tom Owen. I'm president of a company called AMC, commonly known as Aligned. And we've been around for a minute, trying to do work and impact in the chiropractic profession for, Lord, I'm really going to tell my age here, but over 30 years now. And I've got a good friend of mine joining us today, Dr. Zach Wilson from Waterloo, Iowa, is going to join the show. Now, he has quite the background inside of this group AMC. He started way back when, if you could remember, Dr. Zach, as a client, as a member. You probably, you would probably listen to an audio back in those days, but you would have heard something similar to what we're going to talk about today, some subject matter, and found interesting. And you jumped in, and now you have, man, you're living the life. Even though you're in Waterloo, Iowa, you're still living the life, the best you can do in Iowa. Someday you're going to get smart and come join me down here in Florida. But anyway, folks, Dr. Zach Wilson's with us. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. It's good to be with you guys again today.
All right. Well, Dr. Zach, we're sitting here in the middle to back end of February 2024, and it's already been an explosive launch into the new year. We knew it was coming. I know you and I were talking back during the holidays and leading up to when we got together for what we call the Blue Coat training, director training down here in Jacksonville. We knew there was some special stuff coming down the pike, and it has not disappointed. Now, we rolled through a January summit. For those of you that are not familiar with AMC, summits is where it's at. It's 3 to 4 days of intense training. It's not rah-rah seminars. We're not there to entertain you. We're there to make a difference. And January did not disappoint in that matter. There was subject matter, speaking of your tenure with AMC, there was subject matter that was taught, especially on Thursday afternoon. So, members, pay attention. If you haven't heard about the Thursday afternoon classes, I'm telling you, it's going to be priority one. It's something that you have to plan for. It's not going to be replicated elsewhere. It is basically retention and referral central. It's material that really we just haven't had time to cover to that depth in probably over a decade. Would be fair to say that. And that's not because we don't want to. It's simply because back in the day when we started this company, those programs were 4 days of training. We had, I think I calculated 27 hours of content, of classroom content, had been whittled down over the last several years to as little as 11 hours. So just not enough time in the day to get it all out and cover it. So those Thursday afternoons are going to be where it's at. You're going to want to make it a priority to be there. Dr. Zach, I think you even sat in some of those classes, and you've certainly heard some of the feedback from it.
The feedback has been really good. In fact, a lot of the doctors that I mentor and the ones I've talked to over this last couple of weeks, some of their biggest takeaways from that summit, what seemed to really propel them once they got back to their offices that next week, was the content from Thursday. And it made me feel really good because it's, like you said, a lot of that content that used to be taught more frequently, but we've just not had the time to be able to dive into it. And we're bringing that back, delivering that, unpacking that, helping people to understand it and be able to implement it in their practices. And that was the one summit where weather changed my flight plans all over the place. And I was not able to get in Thursday in time like I was supposed to attend that class. And I missed it. And I was bummed because then all the doctors I've spoken to over the last few weeks, they just kept raving about Thursday. Oh, man. So anyway, the next one will be much different. I'm going to make sure if even I have to get on a horse and get down there by Thursday, I'm going to do it.
Well, it's not just the material because, the material is not brand new. It's just deep. And, I want the listeners that are tuning into the show today, you have to understand, these are not just, whimsical protocols or scripts or procedures that we're talking about. We're talking about the depths of principles, really diving into the conceptual components of patient compliance and what builds a referral practice, because referral practices don't grow on trees. There is a foundational piece that you have to build upon. So not only is it content that hasn't been shared in a while, it's never been taught in this manner. So they took
the format that's been put together has changed, and it's really been able to resonate with doctors differently than what it used to be put forward as. And, I don't think a lot of people understand when you say something like that depth of the material to truly understand it more than just a surface level. I think we should take a moment on that because as a listener, you may be maybe even a member of AMC and you've been introduced to a lot of different office procedures and protocols that help you grow a practice and manage patients better and really be a successful clinic. They get introduced to a protocol or procedure. They can, with their doctoring minds, they can think logically their way through it and maybe memorize their way of how they do it so that they can repeat it for themselves over and over, or they know a better way to, say, give a report of findings for somebody with their problem. But I was listening to an audiobook this last week, Tom, that was touching on this. This is an actor, comedian, playwright. He's not a doctor at all, but in his craft, he was referring to this Hungarian word that I couldn't repeat. I don't know how to speak Hungarian, but what it meant was a relaxed mind. To know something to the point where your mind actually relaxes in the moment and you get to open the innate side of you. The emotional side gets to open up and connect with the person in front of you. And I think that's a lot of, it really hit me this week. Like, that's what you're talking about. To know the procedures and protocols of a well-run office to the point, like to the depths and so in you that when you're doing them, and I'm working with a patient face-to-face, my mind is not scrambling on like, what do I need to talk about? How do I need to communicate? What do I need to? No. It's so deep at this point that I don't have to think about it. My mind is actually relaxed. And it was this, I'll have to look up this word for you. I think you'll find it interesting, but when we can go about our day with an understanding and a system to our practice that is understood by us as the leader in the office to such depths and precision and thoroughness that in the moment when we're treating patients, we can actually carry through with that relaxed mindset. It has opened up the ability for us to, for me especially, to be able to connect with the people in front of me, connect with my patients at a level that was not happening a decade ago. It was not happening 20 years ago. It's so, I don't know, it's just so rich. I'm not sure how to describe it for you, but it's just a whole nother level of patient flow, patient connection. It's really what's helping us in the practice. We're starting to see a stability coming about in terms of long-term patient care. Patients that want to be with the clinic long-term, and they're looking for us to be having that relationship as the doctor-patient for a lifetime. And it really is what's allowing the stress levels to go down in the practice. And we've talked about that within AMC Aligned as, that lower stress, self-sustaining referral-based practice. That's been a big touch point for the stress levels, is being able to operate day in and day out with a relaxed mind because of the deeper understanding of all these principles and procedures. And that's what allows me to not carry through my day with a higher level of mental stress of trying to process fast enough to do it right, per se. You get a relaxed mind, you get to touch it with the innate, you get your heart to be able to open up, and you really start hearing what the patient's trying to tell you. It's a cool thing.
And that's where patient compliance, when people hear me, when I use that term, that's where it lives. Patient compliance, patient retention. I'm not talking about the pain model that's, it's like a roller coaster. I'm talking lifetime chiropractic wellness care happens when you own something, own a system like that. And when you were describing that relaxed mind, that's exactly what I try to talk about in class when I say it's not about what you're saying, it's how you're saying it, when you're saying it, your body language, your voice flexion, ownership of it. But, you made me think of a moment or a time in this summit that just passed one in January. We need to talk about the March one coming up here in a second. But in that, we did In Depth and Genius. Now, the Thursday afternoon classes, yes, raving reviews. But I've also heard a lot of strong feedback from the Depth and Genius. And the Depth and Genius was truly the depth and the genius of the fundamentals. Now, for those that attended it, that was not a fun class to attend. It was not fluffy and entertaining and roses and lollipops. I mean, we got down to it. But just to think of this, we spent, myself, Dr. Osborne, and Dr. Dalliers, and Dr. Kriba, spent Friday afternoon of that summit. We spent 4 hours talking about the first 4 minutes of a consultation. We didn't even make it through the procedure. We had to pick it up and run with it on Saturday as we got going. But the whole point was not teaching a procedure, not getting somebody to, anybody can teach a parrot to talk. If you want to learn a script, buy a manual online and get on with it. If you want to own a practice and a business and understand the compliance of the people you're working with, then you have to have an understanding. And that's what you were talking about. That relaxed mind is owning something to a point that you understand why I do certain things at a certain time in a certain way, and maybe why I would want to say a certain phrase here or there. I'm not trying to create robots, but why am I doing it? And that's what the 4 hours for 4 minutes was about, is teaching the why. Because once you know the why, you're not thinking about it anymore. Now you get to be relaxed. You get to enjoy it. It's more fulfilling. It's a lot more fun. And you're more likely to have the advanced conversations that tend to lead to more of the referrals. Because if you're not going to have that referral conversation, that authentic referral conversation. Now, you can be a salesman anytime, but that authentic referral conversation, you're not going to do it when you're trying to remember, what am I supposed to say here and what am I supposed to say there? And I'm trying to check my boxes here and at this list and that list. That's what we're talking about. So You know what? I had no intentions of going that direction today on the show.
It's true. We had a whole different subject matter in mind, didn't we? But that's okay, because I was talking to some doctors that came out of that last summit that were in those classes of you guys breaking down the why behind some of these procedures. But some of them would express to me that it was a little, quote, painful, or like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we spent this much time trying to unpack just such a short amount of time spent in the protocol or procedures within the office. But what they didn't understand, because they were a bit newer to the Aligned family, is that what that class is really doing is expediting the deeper understanding of the core procedures that are taught in Core 1. And so it's like, well, you can either dive in, commit yourself to the process, and go on those deeper dives this year at all the different summits and expedite that process, or just come back to Core 1 for the next 8 years and you'll get it, eventually, which is what we all had to do back in the day. Is it was, you had to just repeat that Core 1 over and over until you could acquire that deeper understanding. Whereas the coursework now, that Depth and Genius, it just gets it done. It's like ripping the Band-Aid. Like, let's do this right here, right now. I like it.
And that's, just go ahead and make it a couple of announcements before we get into what the subject matter you wanted to talk about today on the show is just that. The depth that we're talking about, ripping the Band-Aid off, is really going to take place over the next couple of summits. So the March summit in Orlando, followed by the May summit in Atlanta. Both of those, we're going to continue this process of really digging deep, deep, deep. And trust me, if those were listening, if it wasn't fun for you listening to it, trust me, for those of us that were up front presenting it, it was no more fun for us, because it's taxing to go that deep into it. But it's worth it, right? I know I watched 30 to 35 offices leave that summit in Atlanta, and I knew that those 35 offices were just about to go home and own that particular protocol. From this day forward, it's not something that's going to disappear, in 6 months or so, because now they own it. They understand it. So I encourage everybody right now in this show, if you're a member, you need to circle those two dates. You need to circle March, and you need to say May as well. Now, I tell everybody, you want to move the needle in your practice. There's nothing more predictable. Dr. Wilson is a mentor. He coaches and mentors a lot of offices. He'll tell you the two places where you gain the most traction, the fastest, is summit attendance and certified training center visits. If you have a member that you're mentoring, Dr. Zach, it's not what you say in that 30 minutes a week when you're mentoring them. Obviously, that's valuable and it makes a difference, but nothing's going to do it faster than if you have a member attend all 6 summits in a year and then pick up 1 or 2 certified training centers in the year. So when you put those two together, summits, certified training centers, and then they're actually engaged with the mentoring and the resources that are available, that's why the success is so predictable. You can think about that. Where else can you go in chiropractic? I'll let you speak on this, Dr. Zach. Where else can you go in chiropractic and you can take any technique, any personality, any background, any conceptual concepts of finance, practice, clinical ability. You take all the variables, you throw it all in, and you could wrap all of it around one set of principles to where you could get such a predictable result. We had at that summit in January, think of that for a minute. I know there was only about 60 to 70 of them there present. You know, in Atlanta, we only had somewhere around a third to a half of the AMC membership was even present. So half the membership that are sitting here listening us talk about these Thursday afternoon classes and difference in depth and genius, they don't even know what we're talking about. But in that general session, we experienced what I'm talking about here, the predictability of it. We had 60, 70, something like that, celebrate their best year ever in 2023 over 2022. And I believe, by the way, I'll give you a little shout out here. Our co-host today was one of those doctors, Dr. Wilson.
Yeah.
I thought you were never going to mention that.
Got to put the jewel in your crown here, but I actually got that written down to surprise you, because I know you don't like the spotlight. The $51,000 increase, you beat your best year ever by $51,000 over 2022 and 2023. So congratulations on that. But the point that I was trying to make is when you looked at all those people across the stage up front, and there's 50, 60, 70 of them, and then there's over 100 altogether throughout the company, think of all the different personalities. Think of all the different colleges that they went to. So all the different philosophies, all the different techniques, all the different backgrounds, upbringings, influences, personalities. Some people are variable, some people are producers, some people are connectors, all these different backgrounds, yet they can all wrap around the same principle. That's why I say people and times will change, folks. People and times change, but principles never do. You can lock yourself to a principle. It's timeless. But where else can you find that, Zach? I mean, you're a chiropractor out there in the field.
I have no idea where else you're going to be able to find that. And it is remarkable. You see all those offices being represented up there, having their best year ever, and they are all so unique. They're coming from all over the country. It's not about the location. They're coming from, some in the city, some in the rural, so it's not demographics. The techniques vary tremendously. But you're right, it produces no matter what. You can rely on it. And when I wanted to bring it back to those training centers, that availability to watch that sermon in action is a huge asset to the Aligned family. And I love it when I'm mentoring somebody and they're willing to make the trek to an office and be able to see the system in play. Because you can go to courses and classes and attend a summit, and you're in your head, you're thinking a lot, trying to learn something. How am I going to implement this in my own practice? How can I get things rearranged in my clinic building come Monday? All these logistics, and you're using your logical thinking brain, but it's not the same as going somewhere and watching somebody actually do it in real life with real people and seeing that relationship being unfolded, to see the protocols, procedures being done and how smooth they can be, and having somebody that's put in the work to be able to have it so polished and just have themselves with such a deep understanding of the system that they have that relaxed mind, that lower stress feel and culture within their clinic. And they're watching these referral conversations happening organically. They're watching patients, accepting care and getting wonderful results regardless of the technique. I've had I've had doctors come and shadow my clinic in the past, and they use a completely different clinical approach, but they will leave our office, go back to theirs, and be able to have stepped their clinic up and grow a very good percentage just from seeing that interaction, not necessarily coming to learn how to clinically deliver chiropractic.
And don't forget what they witness from the staff side of it, from seeing and understanding how what we commonly known as like cluster booking or appointment book control, financials, all those components, the CA checklist, and, for that matter, the conceptual components that take place, whether it's in a certified training center or back to those Thursday afternoon classes. In January, that Thursday afternoon class revolved in depth of a procedure that's, a process called the 10-visit checklist. Just to show you can have the greatest of attitudes, you can have the greatest of work ethic. You can try to apply procedures or processes, but if your concepts are off, you can't outgrow a concept. So I'm just going to give you, this is a drastic one, but we had a doctor in Atlanta, right? Well established, that said, wow, I thought the 10-visit checklist was just a list of things that I did on the 10th visit. I'm like, where in the world did you get that? Yes, exactly. You should see Dr. Zach and his eyes here in the studio. Correct. Just don't even understand. But do you think there was much compliance in that doctor's office? Do you think there was that they had a retention issue? And we know for a fact they had a referral issue. The referrals were underperforming because referrals live in that process, in that 10-visit checklist. Worst name I ever came up with, by the way, but it lives in visits 6 through 10. The referrals aren't. And when you have a 6-visit average nationally as a chiropractic outside of the AMC family, the national average is 6. And yet you and I know that the referrals are typically in our process are going to live between visit 6 and probably 20. Somewhere in there is going to be the hot spot, but certainly visits 6 through 10 is going to be the first time that those conversations are organically going to take place in a systematic way. It doesn't happen by accident. There is a reason why it's called depth and genius, because there's a genius behind it. But wow. Well, Dr. Zach, you and I could obviously go on, but I think if anybody just took something from this show, we're coming into the new year. We're still fresh into the new year. People still have a decision to make as to what is 2024 going to be. We're coming out and seeing that there's new processes, new abilities, new opportunities for you in 2024. It's happening at the summits. I can't be your babysitter. I can be a mentor, and a mentor holds you accountable. I can tell you where it's happening. The next time it's happening is in March in Orlando. As I used to say, get on the next thing smoking and get to Orlando. Be there. And then, of course, May, and then the certified training centers. We're showing you the process. We're showing you the path that will guarantee that. But, it's a new year. What are you going to do? What's it going to look like? Now we're in February. Everybody goes through the New Year's resolutions, right? That's called mediocrity. Everybody does that. Who are really still applying to their commitment? Who can even remember what their commitment was from January 1st? What's your expectations in 2024? What are our goals? And if you're not holding yourself accountable and staying the course, right? And that's something I'd like to unpack at a future, Dr. Zach, because I know, one of mine and your favorite poems is where it talks about the set of the sail and not the gale that determines where we're going to go. I'd love to unpack that poem in the future, because that's really what I'm talking about right here. Nothing's going to happen in 2024 without somebody setting a course, and the wind's going to come and the waves are going to hit you side to side. That life keeps coming. Life's hitting you right now in Waterloo, Iowa. Life's hitting me in Jacksonville, Florida. Life's hitting every listener that's on here today. Life keeps coming. but we all overcome life by having an objective and a certainty. And Dr. Zach and I are here to sit here and tell you that the Align family has the course. We have the maps. We have the way to set the trajectory and hold you accountable and keep you on track, but you got to be willing and you got to submit to that process. And speaking of process, Dr. Zach, you got something to add?
I'm excited for that upcoming summit in March in Orlando, not just because it gets me out of the Midwest winter, but I want all the listeners to hear us, Tom, that as Aligned, we are committed to delivering our very best at each and every one of these summits. We don't do them every single month, do we? We're not holding them, every 2 weeks. It's only 6 times a year. So on each one of those, there is a ton of effort that goes into making sure that we are delivering our very best to equipping offices and turning this profession around. But we have to have your commitment, listener. We have to have your commitment, doctors, to being committed to growing yourself and growing your practice to make the impact in your communities and in the lives of your patients that you should be as a doctor of chiropractic.
6 opportunities a year to impact your life. Like when this show ends, you and I are not here to entertain ourselves. We're here to impact as many people as we can while we have our time on earth. And I say you're a younger guy. I have, more in my rearview mirror than I do in my windshield. And all that's left at the end are the lives we've touched and to what extent they were changed. We're here to impact you today. We're here to guide you, direct you, give you some wisdom, give you some insight, give you things to think about so you can set your course to make your best year ever in 2024. But it doesn't come without responsibility. You have to have some responsibility to yourself to follow that guidance and make that commitment. Now, speaking of our efforts and speaking of what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish on this show, I want to make a quick announcement if I can I want to give an announcement, and then I want to do a couple of shout outs before we wrap up today, because I know, and obviously I want to come back, if you're up for it, Dr. Zach, I'd like to unpack that, setting the course, setting your sails, and let's do that together. I think that would be an interesting show. But quick announcement, if I can, to the listeners. It's an exciting time. Everybody knows Ryan Snacks Miller, our producer. He has just recently finally acquired a new software program that's going to allow us to expand our impact. And what that means to the listener, up to this point in the show, I think we're somewhere in the 2-year range since Dr. McMurtry and I launched this show with the idea to provide quality content that would impact, empower, and inspire chiropractors weekly that give you something to build on in your week. Well, for the most part, it's because of that we've had to do it from a live studio, and it's limited to the fact that it's usually Dr. McMurtry and I, and occasionally have a guest that we can capture these shows. But now we have an AI software that's going to allow us to utilize the entire depth of talent that's on the AMC team. So you're going to see a much more diverse lineup. Yes, obviously I'll be the host or co-host most of the time, but we're going to be able to expand and utilize the depth of talent that AMC has in our blue coats and bring subject matter that has been limited in the past. So how would the listeners like to hear an expansion on staff support, staff development, leadership? How about millionaire mindset content, things that are next level, or where you taking your finances, things of that nature? Because that's all stuff that we have to deal with. We're entrepreneurs. We're private business owners, and those are all components to planning your future. But we're going to be bringing a lot more talent to the table. So you can look forward to that. Of course, having Dr. Zach on here is a blessing. You certainly make an impact on the AMC team. I can tell you that, Dr. Zach, you have a way of engaging. You have a way of conveying a message. And the message always comes through authentically, because it always comes from your heart first. And, that's where authenticity lives. So I appreciate what you bring, Dr. Zach, not only to this show, but today, what you bring to the AMC team and the effort that you put into those summits. Because you mentioned the time and effort that go into those summits, and you mentioned there's only 6 a year. Hey, I want you to understand, listeners, those 6 have all been dovetailed together to create a perfect picture puzzle, right? So when you try to plug piece number 2 and piece number 5 together and you're missing the other 4 pieces, yeah. Are there pieces to your puzzle that you can plug in and it'll make a difference? Yeah. Will it have the full impact of bringing the full picture together of all 6 pieces? Just know that they're not independent of each other. They are independent and different, but they are all worked together to dovetail to give you an end of the year impact. That's why we have a theme for the year. That's why we have an objective of the year. What are we trying to accomplish as a team? And we do that 12 to 15 months in advance. We start that planning. So there's a lot of thought and effort and time that goes into when that countdown clock hits 8 o'clock in the morning on a Friday morning, or the Thursday afternoon classes at 1:30. There's a lot of effort and time that's gone into being ready for you. All you need to do is be there with your snacks, with your water bottles, and have yourself be awake and ready to receive. So we're going to be doing that in March. Make sure it's a priority to get yourself there. So folks, we're going to wrap it up. But before I do, I failed to do some shout outs at the beginning. I gave Doctor a shout out to Dr. Wilson there, but I got a couple of 2 or 3 here that I don't get to mention all that often, but only because they don't like the spotlight and they're quiet and they come in the back of the room. They sneak out of the back of the room and you may or may not see them, but man, you're talking about powerhouses in chiropractic, powerhouses in AMC. Dr. Catherine Jones McCaw in South Carolina. She's a 2nd generation practice, folks. All right. She's been a long-term AMC member. I want you to understand, she had her best year ever and grew a 2nd generation practice by 8% over 2023 over 2022. Now, 8% on a practice of that size and that with that tenure, that's very impressive. And she's the sweetest of ladies, very, very professional, classy lady. And I'm just super proud of her. And I wanted to give her a shout. Also, another lady that's close to my heart, Dr. Maureen Work. We celebrated her at the January summit. I'm going to celebrate again here because, hey, folks, when you see what I'm talking about, the doctor, the staff, all working congruently together in sync, you can get predictable results. Dr. Maureen Work upper cervical chiropractor, used to serve on the Atlas Orthogonal board, Dr. Roy Sweat's board. She is top quality, and she experienced 95% acceptance. 95% acceptance for the entire year of 2023.
Yeah, that's not an average over a week. That's the year.
So that's a lot of work. That is working at a peak efficiency levels at all times. And that's not just her. That's that awesome staff of hers.
Yep.
So we just want to give a shout out.
She's really put in the efforts to put her whole team on the same track. Like, man, that is a gelled, well-oiled machine. I love it. Yeah, I was really super proud to see her get up and get that recognition.
And I'm going to give you one more name that you haven't seen these guys in the last couple of years because they've had some family matters that haven't allowed them to travel. But two of my favorite AMC members of all time, Doctors Lou and John Guarneri from Pennsylvania. Yeah. They experienced a 27%, so best year ever, 27% growth from 2022 to 2023 inside the Align family. So the work that they've been doing, they have been very diligent working with Dr. Jeremy Brubaker, who's their mentor. That's impressive. And again, I think that practice is well into the 30-year mark. So to say that after 30 years or more, you've had your best year ever and it by over 27%. Very impressive, and it's worth a shout out. So folks, hey, I hope you'll tune back in. I think Dr. Wilson and I are definitely going to make the commitment to let's do a podcast. Let's do a show, Dr. Zach, on unpacking one of mine of your favorites favorites, but the set of the sail.
Mm-hmm.
Setting the sail. What are we doing? What's our expectations? How do we get to our destination where other people end up on a sandbar on the rocks, getting lost at sea? I'd like to really unpack that together here in the near future. So folks, we're going to wrap it up for this week, and hopefully you got something out of it, if nothing more than a realization of how important it is to engage in your membership. Yes, it's nice to have these podcasts. It's good to have the online library. That's good. Top quality stuff. But the commitment, the engagement, the traction takes place in your summits and in your certified training center. So I hope you'll make the best of 2024 by engaging with the resources that are available to you. And until next week, I hope you have a productive and enjoyable, fulfilling, have fun, right? Those patients need you. You get to lay your hands on patients each and every day. You make an impact. It's valuable. It's worthwhile. So enjoy it, be fulfilled, and we'll talk to you next week. God bless.
And one more thing before we go. If you're a chiropractor who's searching for a better way to build a more sustainable, low-stress practice, then you can contact us at amcfamily.com. You can schedule a discovery session, or you can access any of our free content, webinars, podcasts, and the like.